Hello, I'm Jared.
And I'm Ebony, and this is his
And hers.
Warhammer 40K.
Yay!
We're back.
We're back.
We're on a long break, kind
Yeah,
of.
it's been a while.
Couple weeks.
More than that, actually, a couple months.
Mm.
And I think we've just sort of been pretty busy.
What happened in the last couple months?
Life. Life has been a big part of it.
Yeah.
Particularly, we are getting married.
Oh, woohoo! We got engaged, yeah.
So that's been taking up some time. Ebony's been reading a few other non-40K books on the side. We've just sort of been waiting for the next Siege of Terra book to be made available.
When is it happening?
Soon. We'll talk about that at the end.
Okay. Today we're doing The House of Knight and Chain by David Annandale, which is a Warhammer horror story, which I'm super psyched about because
Yes.
I love reading horror. This one doesn't love the horror as much.
Not so much.
But you love David Annandale.
Honestly, no.
Okay.
So.
All right, fine.
David Annandale, in general, is not an author that when I see his name on a book, I really look forward to. Most of his other books, wasn't super fond of.
Okay.
I know you really like Damnation of Pythos.
My favorite.
Which
Angel Exterminatus might still be my favorite book.
We won't go into that again.
Which really was Perturabo in it.
Whatever. You never read Ruinstorm, but that also had a bunch of horror elements to it.
Okay.
And then his modern 40K stuff, there was a three-parter he did about White Scars, Raven Guard, and salamanders facing off against orcs.
I feel like I read that.
You did not.
In the bowels of a planet?
No.
That was the thing. And there were White Scars and they were fighting the orcs. And it was definitely a lot of underground. A lot of underground happening. There was an orc horde.
No.
Right. I'm not making that up. That happened in a book I read.
Okay. I'm sure it happened in a book. It didn't happen in this one.
Okay.
But what I got from reading interviews about David Annandale is that he is a huge horror fan. And I could see that especially when I was reading Damnation of Pythos.
Mm-hmm. That's really good.
Which is why I was really excited when he was chosen to be sort of one of the lead authors on Warhammer Horror.
Yeah.
And it shows.
Yeah, this book definitely delivers the horror. It's very much a traditional, turning of the screw Gothic horror story, but with Warhammer elements, right?
Yep.
So the main character, Mason Strock, is the patriarch of this family, but he's been away from his family who are sort of in the upper ruling class or upper echelon of a planet called Solus in a city called Valgast.
Yeah, so Valgast is just sort of the capital
of Solus.
Okay. Solus is just a backwater agri-world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it produces its tithe for the Imperium, but otherwise is just kind of forgotten about.
But they've been kind of nickel and diming the Imperium with that tithe, and there's this whole background of corruption, and Mason's entire unit, I guess, that he was in charge of in a war against the Tyranids.
Mason was a colonel in the Imperial Guard.
Right. They won, but terribly. It was bloody and lots of people died, and he has PTSD. And also the powers that be need someone to go back to Valgast and stamp out this corruption. And so they know that he has PTSD and probably can't be in the field anymore. So they've decided that he's going back home to assume the Lord Governor role at Valgast, which his wife had been doing sort of in the interim while he was gone. But she, since she took on that role, killed herself. And so there is also that grief that he's going back with to face the place where his wife died, and also
deal with his adult children
who he hasn't seen in
decades.
Yeah, they were toddlers maybe when he left in the flashbacks, and now they're full adults with their own lives. And so their family house is called Malvale, which is some of the best creepy naming of a haunted house ever. It's a great name, and it's obviously on top of a hill in a sort of deserted woodland-esque area, supposedly because that hill is full of mineral deposits that made the Strock family rich. And so he's going to go home and quell this corruption as a
Yeah.
mission.
He's taken over the mantle of planetary governor for Solus, because the Imperium is looking down on Solus and seeing that they're not meeting their tithe requirements. So Mason's been given the job of basically getting the planet back on track, which introduces some really interesting political elements that we normally don't get to see at a planetary level.
True.
Some other books we've covered have dealt with the High Lords of Terra,
Mhm.
and you sort of see these giant, like, advanced macro level,
Mhm.
discussions, but you never really see it at the planetary level.
Yeah, which I think is cool. And so he has an arch nemesis, I guess,
Yes.
in the form of a lady named Veth Montfort, which is also a super great villain name. And she hates him, and he hates her, and they have this continuing family hatred. And the story is that at some point, it was either the Montforts could become super rich, or the Strocks could become super rich, and the Strocks own this land full of minerals
Mhm.
and or diamonds, and that's how they became the ruling family. So Veth Montfort is on the council, like the Montforts are on the ruling council among other families.
But a Strock has always been
Lord Governor.
Lord Governor.
Yeah. And so Mason gets there, and she's doing some shady things, and he's trying to get people arrested, and at the same time he is sort of finding his recently deceased wife's journal and trying to read it as a way to get close to
But
her at the time before her death.
right, so he goes into Malvale,
which is crazy inside.
which is nuts. Like, the feeling that you get is there have been 100 generations living here,
Mhm.
and all of their crap is still there.
Yeah, it's basically like it's like a terrifying maze on like an episode of Hoarders. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy
Like,
inside their house.
Every other room is just jam packed with stuff.
Yeah, have you ever seen or read? There's a Stephen King book called
I haven't.
Rose Red, because you don't love horror. Yeah, so there's a Stephen King book called Rose Red that's a haunted. It's a gothic horror story, and it's very much Rose Red esque, or like Hill House esque at House on the Hill, which is sort of to say that like you can get lost being in this house really easily. And so there are, he makes it his mission like one weekend to go find something, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna walk down this hallway and it should be straightforward, and I'll make it as far down this hallway as I can, and then I'll come back. And like 17 days later he is still
it's some crazy amount of time.
He's still like trying to find his way back from going down this hallway, which is very similar to what his wife found. Is while she was Lord Governor, she also took it upon herself to make this history of the Strock family.
Yeah,
because
just to figure out the genealogy, because we know of but before his wife took over, it was his uncle
who went crazy, locked himself in the house, and then died. Yeah.
But prior to that, no one seems to remember who ruled before his uncle.
Or I think maybe Eliana, who is the wife, says that she can maybe remember the person who was before the uncle, but that's it. Like, most people can't go back more than 2 or 3 Lord Governors, and there has been a Strock Lord Governor for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And so she's trying to put together this family history by going through the bowels of this house and finding things that used to belong to each other and making this family tree, which starts to drive her crazy.
So we'll stop there, because the stories have all been intertwining.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time that Mason goes and reads another entry in his wife's journal, he's also meeting with his adult children.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Katrin
and Xander. Yeah, and Katrin is like a instructor at the Scholar Progenium. Like, she got injured in training, I think.
Yeah, so she was on the path to follow
her father,
yeah. and to be an officer in the Imperial Guard. But she got really badly hurt.
Mm-hmm. And she has to wear a back brace for permanently, and she can't fight, so now she trains Imperial Guardsmen.
Yeah.
For the tithe of Valgast.
Yep.
And she's really strict and grumpy and pissed at her father. Yeah. His children think it's his fault that his wife killed herself. She killed herself by jumping from the balcony of their bedroom in Malvale, which he's going to be sleeping in that bedroom, so it's super weird that. Um, yeah, so they're mad at their father. There's a really great flashback in the beginning of the book
I was
of
just going to bring this up of the
first
jump.
time, no, of the first time the children see the house. Like, yeah, so
Right.
like
Yeah.
Mason and Eliana are walking up a hill with their children, and they aren't. He isn't Lord Governor at the time. I guess his uncle.
They're just visiting
Yeah,
his uncle.
he's gonna show them their family home, and like the kids see it, and it's so scary from the outside that it traumatizes them basically forever,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is like super great foreshadowing, and just very cool. That scene's really cool.
His daughter, like, I think, was it that she also sees him as sort of a failure
Mm-hmm.
because he basically got pulled back to
Mm-hmm.
this backwater, and it's almost like a demotion
Yeah,
for someone in the Imperial Guard to basically say, by the way, now you're doing garrison duty.
yeah. She definitely thinks that he's being punished, and he is and is not being punished. He
Yeah.
definitely has pretty terrible PTSD, which we get a lot of flashbacks of that, which I think David Annandale does really well. There's a lot of like present scary in this creepy house, and then sudden like war scary, and it works really well, the back and forth.
Yeah.
I like that.
And then there's Xander.
Who has just decided like fuck everything.
So-
Like he wants zero responsibility because he
Right.
thinks his father's responsibility took him away from his family and that ruined their family, and his mother's taking on his father's responsibility on the planet
Killed her.
drove her crazy and killed her. So he's just like, yeah, I guess I'm kind of on this council, but really I'm just gonna get drunk and bang hookers, which I guess that's one approach to your problems. And so
Right.
he just kind of like is out partying and doing drugs and sleeping with ladies
Yeah.
and men. Maybe we don't know. It's wild.
Yeah. Xander has definitely just tried to hide as much as
Yeah.
possible.
He pretty much spends his days in council pretending to be asleep. I
Mhm.
think, like he's not about that job at all. He doesn't want it to kill him, which I guess is a fair response.
Well, so that's an interesting point, and I appreciate when that's sort of revealed when Mason does really sort of dig into his son, that it's not that he's just lazy.
Yeah, he's not lazy or stupid. He's just decided that he won't do this. That this isn't going to kill him.
Well,
Yeah.
well, right, because he knows that any attempt to actually improve it
Mhm.
will have the Montforts and their allies
Yeah.
against him.
Yeah, so he's been kind of just letting the Montforts do whatever they want to do on the council. And so now Mason's back and he wants their whole family together at Melville to look strong.
Yeah.
And also probably to support him because it's lonely and weird at Melville. And reluctantly, the kids agree.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I really liked the...
I actually think they agree after he's almost killed. It's after the first. So on the political
Oh, the
sides
top-
of things,
after the
yeah,
tower
after the
toppled?
bridge, I think.
Was it a bridge or was it
There's a
tower?
bridge and then there's a tower, I think.
All right.
Yeah,
There was a big thing that like crashed in front of it.
Yeah, on the political side of things, he thinks Beth Montfort, they're having this Game of Thrones political-esque battle, and he thinks she's trying to kill him. And on his way home in the rain one day, his driver, who doesn't have legs, his driver just has track wheels.
Yeah.
His driver has no lower body, which weird. They're on their way home and heavy rains cause a bridge to collapse, and like it's a really well done scene. It reminds me a lot of, I know you haven't seen it, there's a movie based on a book called The Mothman Prophecies,
Okay.
and they happen around the time of a bridge collapse. The story is like aliens or whatever, but it's a real bridge collapse that happens, and like there are cars on this bridge and transports on this bridge and humans on this bridge, and the whole thing falls into this river and sinks. And I think that the scene is done really beautifully. It's really like horrifying and super vivid and realistic and well described. And Mason survives, but he thinks that it's part of an attempt on his life. Like he thinks that Beth Montfort has killed all these people to make him sad, or to kill him.
Well, to solidify her power.
Yeah, and at the same time, he has two friends who never left Valgas that he's confiding in.
Right.
Adriana
and
Rivas,
who's
who's a priest.
priest.
Which will be useful later in this haunted house story. Yeah, and so this attempt on his life scares him, and he went and spoke to Katrin at least, and maybe he tried to speak to Xander, and Katrin was not having it. But then, they're convinced that the Montforts are trying to kill him, and Katrin at least is very like, we're the Strocks, and we have to stop this. And if it's about corruption,
I I thought so. They had a scene where they reconcile pretty well together,
yeah, they're similar people.
where basically Mason apologizes
I think that's
to.
after the.
Is it?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
I could be wrong.
I really appreciated that they do sort of are able to push through what
Mhm.
happened
Yeah,
and kind of come together. Xander's still kind of being pulled along, but
yeah.
he's sort of coming around.
Yeah, and so they end up living in the house with him. He does not tell them that he's found their mom's journal because that would be hard. And he's reading it and discovering that no Strzok has ever had a successful heir
Heir, yeah, a direct heir.
become the next Lord Governor. And so, his plan is that they're going to do this thing as a family, and then one of his kids will be Lord Governor, and blah, blah, blah. And the twist is that that's never happened in the history of the Strzok family. And so, obviously, the question is, what happens? And the answer is that something terrible always happens.
So Xander finds that out,
Yeah.
and it freaks him out.
Yeah, he is a little more inclined to believe the mysterious than
Yeah.
Katrin or Mason, right? And so he has quickly jumped to this conclusion that we are all going to die. Like, this is not going to work out well. We're all going to die because that's how it has always happened. And so at the same time, Mason starts thinking that Veth Montfort knows what's up about this and he needs to break into her house.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really know how he got to, I need to break into her house.
Well, so at this point, he has had multiple dream sequences, essentially.
Yes.
Where he is not sure.
And Adriana might be dead. I think she dies before he breaks into her. Yeah. So that's a big thing. Like, his friend Adriana, who's been a family friend of his for a long time, is murdered, and we're not really sure about how she was murdered. But Veth Montfort accuses him of murdering his friend, and he's actively accusing her of murdering his friend. And so they have this standoff, and he needs some way to prove that it's her fault that Adriana's dead.
Right. I don't think it's fully revealed how she dies.
Mm-mm. But it's gruesome because they like show him the body and it
Right.
freaks him out. But it's not really, it's one of those sort of Cthulhu scares. It's like, this is so terrible, we're just not going to describe it.
Yeah. What else was there that was really good? Oh, right, the dream sequences.
Yeah.
So the dream sequences, Mason is not sure if he has like young children or adult children. Like if this is now or if this is when he's visiting like just at his uncle's and his children.
Yeah, so he's in this house alone until the kids move in. And even after his adult kids move in, there's a lot of like creepy little girl laughter and like turning a corner and seeing baby Katrin and Xander turning a corner just ahead of him. So there's a lot of that like dream sequence and or active hallucinations. It's not clear where he is like chasing his past family around the house, right? He starts to see Eliana, which is how it starts.
Do you remember there was one scene where he walks into the room, and I don't remember which child it was, but they're sitting there in the room made of bones.
Mm-hmm.
And like everything was on fire.
Yeah, there's also a lot of fire happening.
A lot of fire.
Yeah. And rooms that he can't get into. So he's like chasing them and trying to find rooms. And I guess sort of simultaneously with Eliana's journal and with his hallucinations, they find this tower.
The old tower.
Yeah, that is a spiral staircase, right? And you can go down it. But the further down you go, coming out of the middle of it is what is described as a pile of crap.
This description was always very weird for me.
It's like if everyone who has ever lived there just piled their stuff on top of each other. And so there's this column of debris dating back centuries that like you can walk around a spiral staircase down, and a glowing light, which we all know is definitely chaos. But he's like, I don't know what's at the end of this staircase. And so both Eliana and Mason end up trying to make it to the bottom of that staircase, and spoiler alert, nothing good is at the bottom of that staircase.
Well, they don't make it. Like a bunch of times that are tried,
Yeah.
they basically can't breathe and turn back.
And or something terrible happens, like a terrible demon thing happens. And then some of the scariest scenes are like these weird like pseudo sexual memories of Eliana where she then turns into a demon of teeth. It gets very intense very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of like Eliana, like he'll wake up and she's in bed like spooning him, and he'll turn over to like kiss her, and then she will smile until her mouth takes up her whole head and try to eat him, and it's very intense.
Yeah, the description I got is basically if you took someone's mouth
and you just kept opening
it, but then you also like tilted it back,
Yep.
and then like your tongue would come out.
If you haven't, if you ever seen Beetlejuice, there's a thing that the
have.
ghosts do in Beetlejuice, right?
I saw
Like
it.
where she stretches.
I'm aware of what it is.
That's exactly what I imagine it looks like.
So
but maybe more vertical.
More vertical, because I was thinking it's more like, imagine a bear trap, like a set one, but with a tongue coming up in the middle.
Yep. Yeah. Super great.
Yeah.
So then I guess eventually Mason comes around to saying like, I need help. And lucky for him, he has a friend who is a priest.
Yeah.
Right? And he's I think he doesn't go to the priest until after he breaks into Veth Montfort's house, which, yep, the Lord Governor is breaking into ladies' houses.
It was very unusual at that point, because he's kind of, he teams up with a cat burglar.
Yeah, he like found a random burglar and was like, hey, why don't you teach me how to break into this lady's house? And the cat burglar is like, we also hate that lady, so yeah, we'll break in with you. And they break in, and it's weird in there. Veth Montfort is like...
She's really big into the S&M.
Yeah, there's a lot of like what sounds like chains and torture, but maybe everyone likes it. It could be consensual. It could not be. You can't tell from the way it sounds.
So based on the descriptions at the end, it's pretty much all consensual.
Yes,
yeah.
But he doesn't know that. So he thinks she's some like weird, crazy maniac torturer. Yeah. So they break in, and she's having a sex dungeon party while they break in, and they make their way to her attic, and she has this painting of an ancient Shrock, like some ancestor of his. But the painting
wasn't it the painting of the one who originally...
Yeah. So it's this painting of the first Strock Lord Governor. I think he's the first one to become Lord Governor. And it is full of the warp. Like the frame is warpy, and like weird lights are coming out of it.
It has...
And it's got some sort of pact on the back of it.
Well, it has the octet printed on it.
Yeah. And basically he gets the gist of the story, which is that the Strocks have sold themselves to chaos. Like, they will be the leaders of Valgast as long as none of them ever has an heir, and they have a portal to chaos in their basement, right? Like that's what they've agreed to.
So chaos is basically consuming their legacy.
Yes.
What near the end, there's a really interesting description that explains what is all that debris in the tower. And initially, once he sort of figures out what is going on, he thinks, oh, that is every Strock just trying to plug up the hole by like shoving stuff down into it. But that's not what it is.
It's eating it, yeah.
It's eating everything associated with them.
Yeah, and that's why there are no good records of the Strocks in like the archives of the Valgast government, which is where Eliana used to work, and how she started this. Like
those were great.
Yeah, going down into the bowels of this giant like library were great. Yeah, and they don't exist because the house has been eating them. Chaos demons have been eating them, I guess. Yeah, and so he tries to take this painting, but he can't. They have to escape because Veth Montfort might catch them. So he breaks out, and then he goes to Revis, and he's like, clearly something terrible happened in our family. Like, we have made this deal with chaos, and I need you to help save us. And Revis is like, yeah, I called some Inquisitor friends that I have, and they say we should do this thing, which is basically the Warhammer version of an exorcism. Revis is like, it's cool, I got this. Me and you are going to go down this tower, and we're going to do an exorcism, and everything's going to be great. Except it is not. They go down in that tower, they try to do an exorcism, and Revis gets destroyed.
So you get this is sort of the one part where I would say it falls back a little bit into 40K traditional imagery
Okay.
rather than the very intense sort of horror side of it.
Okay.
Because the demons that they're facing are clearly a bloodletter, are clearly a plague bearer, are clearly a Slanesh demonette, and are clearly a flamer of Zinch.
Okay.
Like, those descriptions are like you could stick the models down on the table and be like, all right. So that was the one scene that was like, okay.
Yeah.
But the rest of it was really, really interesting. And then Revis, is basically says like, run, I'll try and hold them off. And he's a very devout priest and has these Inquisition connections.
Yeah.
And the scene or the line after Mason runs upstairs and hears a man losing his faith, or something like that.
Yeah,
that was a really terrifying.
Yeah, line. It's basically just he's running back up the stairs from this tower, listening to demons eat the essence and the physicalness of Revis.
Yeah.
Right, and so now he's freaked out and he knows that there's no way about this. And I don't. He at the same time he's also having this problem leaving the house, which is a thing that happens to you in this house.
He keeps wanting to go back to like the city to
Belgast, but he goes out and gets physically sick. Mm-hmm. So he physically can't leave the house.
Which we learned his wife was starting to have as well.
Yeah. And so he's got the kids in the house, but he's also now convinced that all of the things that are happening in the house to him are fake, and that he can no longer trust his point of view, which now you have this first person POV from an untrustworthy narrator, and now you don't actually know if his adult children are there or if they are demons presented to him, kind of the way Eliana has been. And so now he's going back and forth with what he should do about these demons who are sleeping downstairs in his house. And at first he tries burning the house down with them.
Right, so within these dreams, he's always seen this guy running through this house, lighting fires to burn the house down. And he is always trying to be the one to save his children and get them out of the house. And at this point, he realized, no, I am the one who's supposed to set the fires and burn down Malvel.
Mm-hmm. Except that's not a real thing. He has that whole scene where he's burning down this house, and then he like gets outside to the front porch and turns around, and like his cop friend is there. He's made like another friend who's helping to investigate Adriana's death, and like he gets to the front porch, and his cop friend's on the porch about to knock on the door. Actually, this might be Beth. This might be the end.
No, it's not.
No, it's the cop friend.
It's not.
Yeah, and the cop friend's like, dude, what is wrong with you? And he's like, nothing, never mind, talk to you later, bye. And he goes back inside and the house is fine. But like in his imaginings, he had burned this house down to embers. And he's like, crap, I really can't trust anything. And now he's convinced that everything that happens at the house is fake. And so
his children confront him because they start to see just how crazy he's starting.
Yeah, because I mean, he's been talking to his non-existent dead wife and ordering about house servants who aren't there because he sent them away, and like creeping outside their bedroom doors at night, being super weird, and lighting imaginary fires.
Right. And so they are really worried about him. And he is firmly convinced now that they are not
real. Yep.
Which leads to some extremely brutal scenes
of child murdering.
I
mean, they're adult children, but they're still his children. Yeah. And so
where he pulls an ancestral chainsword off the wall.
Yep.
And just does he decapitate Xander?
Yep.
And then
no, I think he decapitates Katrin. Yeah,
Katrin tries to fight him off with a shield.
Yeah, and I think he decapitates her. I think he hacks Xander to death.
Yeah,
it's real
gross. Now, and it basically all stems from he believes the house is only powerful at night.
Yeah. So
and because this is when he's been having all these weird dreams, and this is when all of these whisperings and strange things have been happening. Mm-hmm. And so when they confront him at night, that's why he's convinced that they're not real. Yeah. And is sure that come daybreak,
It'll be fine.
Their bodies will
Disappear. It'll be like the fire, right? Except come daybreak,
and the
he's
bodies are still
he's
there.
in a house with his decapitated children, and Veth Montfort is ringing the doorbell.
Right.
Yeah. And so basically, he opens his door. He's covered in blood. She can probably see body parts behind him in the entryway. And she's like, "Yep, it's over. You can't leave this house." And he's like, "What?" And the sort of surprise plot twist is that the Montfort family, while not the best people, they're kind of grumpy. They definitely have an S&M basement in their house.
And they are on the pirate side.
Yeah,
like they have actually been
corrupt. Yeah, but they have agreed to stand between the evil Strock family and the people of Valgast. And so they are the sort of checks and balance for Mason's family's crazy, and they are the family that remembers, which is why she has that painting of the original Strock. And it's their job to make sure that the corruption that's happening in Malville doesn't leak its way out into the rest of Valgast, but they can't destroy Malville, and neither can the Inquisition, because memories of this family are getting eaten by chaos.
So that part bothers me.
Yeah,
because that part doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
there's a line where Mason is talking to her and says, "Well, why didn't you go to the Inquisition?" And she says, "We've tried that, but the Inquisition always forgets."
Well, I think it's that they probably send a single Inquisitor, and that Inquisitor gets destroyed the way Rebus does, and another Inquisitor doesn't come behind him.
I guess.
Which seems kind of fishy for how thorough the Inquisition can be when they want to be.
But they can also not be. Like,
I guess.
I can kind of get that.
Yeah.
But
it could have been clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's like, he's freaked out, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't know, sorry." And
so she says to him, if you really think that things are okay, step outside.
Yeah. And she's like, "You can't."
This door. And he thinks about this, and he says, "Well, of course he can." And then as he attempts it, he basically says, "I couldn't leave the house in the same way I couldn't just start floating."
Yeah.
The concept seemed impossible.
Yeah. And so he goes back inside and goes down the tower.
Well, so not yet. Veth leaves. He gets everything that was in his room, everything associated with him, and starts filling a room.
Yeah.
Just like all of the other rooms when he first arrived there.
Were fully full of junk.
Full of junk. He just starts tossing all of his stuff in there and makes it so that there's no memory in any of the easily accessible rooms of his existence. Then he drags the bodies of his children down to the basement of the tower,
where there's a door.
There is a wall that opens, and behind the wall is the rest of his family. All the Strocks that have been forgotten over the centuries, and his wife. And he walks through that. And his wife is there and says, "Shh.
I'm here." Yep.
And then the wall closes behind him. And then, there's a chilling last line.
It's over for him.
Let me pull that out.
It's really good.
"I'm here now. I scream as they come for me. I scream as Eliana wrapped her talons around my neck. I scream as the first moments of forever begin." Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
That was that's quite the final moments.
Yeah.
As he's basically taken into the warp.
Forever.
Yeah. So I've read a couple of other Warhammer horror stories, a couple other short stories. This was by far my favorite.
Yeah, pretty good. We've been reading them, going through them kind of short story at a time. I think this is the only one that's been full novel length, right, that we've read?
I read another one that you didn't. But,
okay.
I thought this was phenomenal.
Yeah, I thought it was really good.
Genuinely terrifying at times.
Yeah.
I loved the detail of Solus.
Mm-hmm.
I loved the sort of political elements to it. I
Yeah.
felt pretty much every character was utilized properly.
Yeah, I could have used maybe a little more of Adriana and Rebus, like his friends. But I get why they weren't utilized that much. We could have used more of that, I think. But yeah, I think that the scenery is really beautifully described. It's really well written, and it's constantly ratcheting up the stress level that you have. It really translates really well seeing through Mason's eyes and seeing through his eyes watching Eliana go crazy. Like you, every chapter that I read, I felt a little more stressed out reading it, which I think speaks really well to the writing. Yeah, I thought it was great.
What other thoughts did we have?
I don't know. What's next on our list?
So next on our list will be The First Wall,
which
is the third Siege of Terror book. I read the physical copies, so I wait for those to be available.
Awesome.
So we'll hop back into that.
I'm excited.
And hopefully...
Sanguinius is still being useful?
For once.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
But yeah, we might do another... either another Warhammer horror book or the Warhammer crime series.
That sounds exciting.
Is now out and is getting some pretty great reviews.
I love a good film more.
So we might do that after The First Wall.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we're looking forward to.
Yeah.
Yay.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Thanks.
Live and direct from our basement. Changing it up.
Just a little.
Bye.
Bye.